Tonight, an international oil giant confirms its plans to drill in the Great Australian Bight and fears a local basketball club will be forced to fold if it can't raise enough funds.
This is Southern Cross News with Fraser Goldsworthy.
Good evening. Norwegian oil company Equinor has confirmed its plans for exploration drilling in the Great Australian Bight. Pending application approval, the oil giant hopes to begin drilling in the second half of next year. Casey Trelaw has more.
Since becoming the operator of the exploration permit in the Great Australian Bight, Equinor, formerly known as Statoil, has now confirmed its plans for exploration drilling activity. After 2 years of planning, the company is now in its final stages of preparing its environmental plan. Should the plans be approved, exploration drilling could begin as soon as 2019.
Well, Equinor has been clear for some time that they plan to drill within the next 2 years, and most likely at the end of next year.
In a statement to Southern Cross News, Equinor says the proposed drilling activity is to confirm if oil or gas is present, and with the understanding of the geology of the area, there could be an active petroleum system within the permit zone located 400 kilometres offshore. It is currently preparing the environmental plan, which will be submitted to NOPSEMA for approval. The Australian Petroleum Association says it should be an exciting time for South Australia and the local region.
It's a very exciting opportunity for South Australia. We have to get the balance right, but there is no reason that we should not have a safe, sustainable and successful offshore petroleum industry in South Australia.
Equinor says it has undertaken extensive work meeting with more than 60 organisations, including councils, industry associations and tourism operators. The company has successfully drilled more than 65 deepwater wells across the world and says it will only undertake drilling activity if it can do so safely.
Casey Trelaw reporting there. A woman set to face court after allegedly failing to provide a breath test after a crash in a school zone in Whyalla. Just after 3:30 yesterday afternoon, officers responded to an incident in Russell Street. The 51-year-old, who police say was involved in the crash, allegedly was unable to undergo a breath test. She's been charged with driving under the influence and has lost her licence for a year. CCTV cameras will soon be installed around some of Broken Hill's major parks. The new technology aims to make the city safer and aid police in catching reoccurring vandals.
Eyes in the sky looking over the city's parks.
People need to feel safe.
Council's plan to improve safety around Broken Hill's major parks received a financial boost this week. The federal government committing over $50,000 to help install the technology across the community areas. Council was also committed nearly $600,000 in its budget for the cameras, as well as smart lighting. The technology will be rolled out in Sturt Park first and then delivered to other parks around the city.
And then more broadly across the city, as part of our Smart Communities framework, we'll be looking at putting it into Argent Street, where some of the hotspots are around Town Square, the post office corner and those sorts of things, just to make sure that we've got the city covered.
Sturt Park has been the subject of vandalism in recent years. Even worse, a man was attacked there in March. Council says the vision can be passed on to police if required.
And there's been a lot of sort of antisocial behaviour that goes on from time to time. So, really for us this is just about putting some measures in place that hopefully will act as a bit of an education and deterrent.
And there's another benefit.
It does give us the opportunity to be in real time, to be able to monitor what might be happening when there's events on, for instance. We can monitor in real time what's happening. So it's a bit of a win-win for the city and a great initiative.
The installation will be mapped out once Council's draft budget is adopted later this month. Patrick Roinke, Southern Cross News.
Farmers under financial stress will receive new protections under legislation introduced by the state government. It'll force creditors into mandatory mediation with landowners to ensure they aren't put under any further pressure.
Farmers are passionate about their profession, but it comes with many uncertainties. Weather, commodity prices and supply and demand can all put stress on finances.
those issues come together, it does put financial stress on cash flow and bottom lines.
It also places small properties at the mercy of their creditors, which can include large financial institutions. So the state government is moving to give smaller farmers protection. It's introduced legislation to Parliament this week, which will force creditors seeking money into mandatory mediation through the Small Business Commissioner.
Bring the two parties together so that we can look for a positive outcome so that farmers can continue to farming and bankers continue to have confidence.
Similar legislation in the eastern states has slashed the amount of foreclosures.
Victoria, as an example, they've had a 95% success rate through farm debt mediation.
The Liberals had put up a similar bill in opposition in the previous Parliament, which didn't make it through the lower house. Shadow Minister Eddie Hughes says they've received the legislation and will consider it.
So at this stage, we've got an open mind on the bill, and it's got to go through our internal processes.
Mr. Whetstone says he hopes they see sense and pass it.
Sensible politics. It's sensible that this bill be accepted.
John Hunt, Southern Cross News.
There are fears over the future of a basketball group in Crystal Brook. The courts no longer meet safety standards, and the club is turning to fundraising to bring its facilities up to date.
Shooting goals in these run-down hoops, a safety hazard for many. Built over 40 years ago, the towers are proving to be extremely heavy and difficult to move.
They're looking quite rusty and old. They need to be upgraded to comply with standards, and so that we can ensure the safety of our children and for inclusion of all ages.
Just might look a bit nicer and tidier, so yeah.
The 2016 storms wiped out the club's canteen and storage facility, leaving them with little money to upgrade their facilities. The community is now rallying together to save the club, which has more than 100 members, holding quiz night fundraisers and bake sales down the main street of Crystal Brook.
We're looking at fundraising $25,000. However, we have had quotes in the vicinity of $30,000+.
Without the much needed funding, the future of the Crystal Brook Junior Basketball Club is uncertain.
We're really passionate. We don't want to see the basketball club close, but we need to ensure that our courts and our backboards are safe for our children.
It would be really disappointing.
Rachel Nell, Southern Cross News.
After the break, Peterborough residents fear they're being targeted by people trying to poison their pets. That story next. A community update meeting for the Silverton Wind Farm is being held tonight in Silverton. The meeting will allow members of the community to get a progress report on the renewable energy project to see where it's currently at. The meeting is open to all at the city's municipal chambers. Residents of Peterborough fear they're being targeted by people trying to kill their pets. They claim pieces of meat are being left out for their dogs in a bid to get them used to poisonous baits, saying the behaviour isn't uncommon around town.
Thrown over the fence just a week ago, this is what remains of a lamb pelvis.
People obviously come in through the paddock and throw goat's legs. They've been butchered professionally, so over the fence, and we don't know whether it's bait or to get the dogs used to them for a bait.
Peterborough local Ben Fisher is worried it's a malicious attempt at tricking his two dogs, Bailey and Max, into eating bait, having lost two dogs to baiting in the past. He says he's had a number of animal carcasses thrown over the fence in the last 2 weeks and claims he's not alone.
Yeah, I've had two baited and died, and yeah, so it is something that does happen in town a fair bit.
He says the most common bait in Peterborough is rat sack, a toxic poison that can kill dogs quickly.
Gums go white and they, won't eat, drink, anything.
Ideally with rat sack, you'd like to get the dog to the vet within a couple of hours.
With the closest clinic in Jamestown, local vets say it's extremely important to recognise warning signs and act quickly if you suspect your dog has been baited.
They're going to act fairly quickly, half an hour, and your dog will be very agitated, possibly running around, maybe diarrhoea, maybe vomiting, maybe doesn't want to be handled by you, and that could progress to seizures.
Rachel Nell, Southern Cross News.
Whyalla and Port Augusta residents may hear the sound of firearms and tanks as the Army returns to Coltana for training. The 1st Armoured Regiment will be here for the next week, testing themselves in preparation for deployment.
The Coltana training base is a hive of activity at this time of year, as the Army puts regiments through their paces. The next batch of training begins tomorrow, with soldiers from the 1st Brigade in the region for live-fire training.
Think of the adage of crawl, walk, run when you're learning something. We're about the run stage for the year of 2018 in our training calendars.
The 1st Armoured Regiment is taking part in exercise Paratus Walk from June 8 to 16. Soldiers will be practicing live-fire drills using handheld weapons and vehicles including M1A1 tanks and light armoured vehicles.
Getting our men and women in the turrets, getting their technical proficiencies signed off and up to the highest standard that we possibly can.
The unit will also be practicing tactical manoeuvres,
where we'll basically give them a tactical scenario that they need to work within.
The Army says weather conditions will limit noise in the region, but residents may hear some sounds from the training area as the week goes on.
What residents around the local area will notice is the 25mm of the ASLAV, and obviously the main battle tankers.
John Hunt, Southern Cross News.
Still to come tonight, plans for local musicians to put on a show in Port Lincoln. That's next. The Broken Hill Hospital kiosk has donated just over $160,000 to the local health service. In the last 9 years, the volunteer-run kiosk has raised over $1.6 million for the hospital. The kiosk says it's also always looking for more volunteers to join the team. Well, it can certainly be a challenge for young musicians to perform live shows and also for young people wanting to see a show locally. But some local musicians and youth workers in Port Lincoln have teamed up to put on an all-ages live concert, which will kick off tomorrow night.
A rock star concert put on especially for the younger generation.
A local Adelaide band called Firebird, they'd been in contact with the West Coast Youth about coming over to organise an event and possibly play a show over here.
And after a successful youth concert at this year's Salt Festival, Ari teamed up with the West Coast Youth to produce a star-studded concert.
For the first time, we're actually hosting an event that the Youth Advisory Committee here in Port Lincoln have undertaken the planning and event management for.
It's the first time a live show will be performed at the Youth Hub.
Lots of fundraising. In fact, most of the events being paid for with recycled cans that have been collected. Also lots of cake stalls and barbecues and just a whole variety of fundraising events.
While the Adelaide band will headline the show, there'll be plenty of local talent on display.
We've got Peach Fuzz, they're a 5-piece. They played the last set at the Seed event. We've got Kaya Huntley. I think she's bringing a 3-piece. We've got Titan Austin, who's a really talented musician. We've got a duo called Indie Blue. They also played at the Seed event.
And there's hope the concert tomorrow night won't be the first.
If obviously this is quite successful, there will open avenues for more similar events, possibly different venues, just basically see where it goes from here.
Casey Trelaw, Southern Cross News.
Should be a good show. Time now for this week's fishing tips.
Welcome another week around the Gulf Fishing Tips. You know what the really strangest thing is at the moment? Yellowfin whiting is still floating around the place. I would have thought they're all gone. Everybody's caught enough, but there is still yellowfin around the place. So do try your creeks over this weekend and also along Talawi Beach. Great time to be on the beach over a long weekend. King George whiting has started to come on around Port Pirie. Checker Buoy, try there, and also around Cockle Spit area you should do fairly well. If you're looking at snapper, the creek size snapper, the panties are still the ones to chase, so work along those creeks.
Things have been a little bit slow across Whyalla with the annual bloodworm run, but let's hope that things continue to improve for this week coming. Also with some fresh tides, we should see some good fish coming in. Best areas to target for King George whiting is definitely down towards Mount Young. There's been some good schools of fish spotted down there in the shallow water. In the 2 to 3 metre water depth, there's been some great fish pushing through there. Hopefully with the fresh tides and the bloodworm run finishing, they should be on fire. Squid in the same area. Along the one steel walls, we've had big numbers of garfish, so get amongst those guys. And there's been some really big schools of salmon just arriving into Whyalla. Best areas to target have been the Point Lowly Lighthouse, walking around the rock bases there.
G'day, welcome to this week's Fishing Tips from Port Lincoln. Starting up at Tumby Bay, there hasn't been a lot of news, but there's been some really big squid getting caught between Tumby Bay and Port Lincoln. Back in the bay here at Port Lincoln, better squid catches have been coming from North Shields, the Town Jetty, Snapper Point and Snook's Landing, with late afternoon high tides being the best bet. Moving down to the south coast, there's been some great schools of salmon down there, mainly between the Wanna to Miller's Hole stretch. Offshore action was a little bit quiet. Some guys managed to get some nanagai and a few samson fish south of Williams Island over the weekend, and then one crew ventured to the cabbage patch for their limit of tuna and a few kingfish as well. That's it for this week. We'll see you again next week.
Stay with us. Amy's next with all the weather details. And Amy, it certainly was a wet day around the Spencer Gulf.
It sure was, Fraser. However, temperatures did remain quite high despite the rain. I'll have the details next. Welcome back. As mentioned earlier, the region did receive a soaking today, a top of 20 in Port Augusta and Port Perry, while maximums in Whyalla and Port Lincoln were only slightly below. Checking the satellite now, and cloud covering most of the state with a front-end upper-level trough is causing showers to increase in the southwest. Skies are clearest in the far east near a high-pressure ridge. Take care if you're heading out on the waters tomorrow, with northerly winds shifting northwesterly up to 20 knots with seas reaching 3 metres. Sunrise will be at 7:19 and it'll set at 17 past 5. It's going to be a wet start to the weekend with rain forecast for all centres tomorrow. Temperatures will drop in Port Augusta, Whyalla and Kadina to sit in the mid-teens. Looking towards the start of next week, and after some brief relief from the showers, a wet and windy Monday is expected in Port Lincoln. A fine weekend predicted in Cleve with showers returning and a top of 18 on Monday with similar conditions in Woodner. Temperatures will reach 20 on Sunday in Whyalla with possible showers forecast on Monday. Maximums in Port Augusta will sit in the 20s going into next week. Meanwhile, Kadina can expect tops of 19 degrees. Port Perry will reach 20 on Monday also, with showers predicted. Maximums will sit at 17 in Clare to kick off a new working week, while Broken Hill is in for a mostly sunny weekend, but could see some showers on Monday with a top of 20. So Fraser, best not to put those umbrellas away just yet as we head into the weekend.
Thanks, Amy. Taking a look at tonight's top stories now. Norwegian oil company Equinor has confirmed its plans for exploration drilling in the Great Australian Bight. Pending application approval, the oil giant hopes to begin drilling in the second half of next year. CCTV cameras will soon be installed around some of Broken Hill's major parks. The new technology aims to make the city safer and aid police in catching reoccurring vandals. And Whyalla and Port Augusta residents may hear the sound of firearms and tanks as the Army returns to Coltana for training. The 1st Armoured Regiment will be here for the next week, testing themselves in preparation for deployment. And that's Southern Cross News for this evening. Thanks for your company. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Good night.